This podcast is not a substitute for a relationship with a mental health professional. Hello, family. Welcome back. It is your girl, Andrea Wise Brown, and you are now listening to and watching the Mental Health is a Lifestyle podcast by your girl, Andrea Wise Brown. I am so happy once again to be here with you again, family. I live for these moments when I can hopefully empower you and educate you so that you find quality of life. I want you to be empowered so you can create the shift in your life that you desire. So thank you for joining me here, family. It means everything to me. And before we get started, today we're going to talk about narcissism. But before we get started, I would love for you to click that little subscribe notification and that bell so that you can really commit to being a part of the family and you can get a notification anytime there's a new episode up. Okay? All right. So I just want to talk to you guys today about narcissism. So it is a disorder that has been thrown out everywhere. He's a narcissist. He's a narcissist. He's a narcissist. Andrea, he's a narcissist. Andrea, I'm dating a narcissist. Andrea, you know my husband's a narcissist. Like, that's all I keep hearing is people diagnosing other people with narcissism. Where'd you get your clinical information from? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. Now, let me tell you something. I love to call a thing, but let's reel it back and figure out, is the thing that thing? Yeah. Let's talk about it today. I want to talk about it today because just because you go on a date with somebody that you met on a dating app, and no shade to dating apps, because I do believe that it is one of the ways to date and to meet people. And yes, people have found success from dating apps where they married and have children and great fruitful lives. So no shade to a dating app. I'm just thinking about some specific cases that I've heard. So just because you want a dating app and you date somebody and you meet them twice and I don't know, something that they may have said that was off-putting to you, and then they ghost you and don't ever call you back, does not make them a narcissist. Okay? You can't just diagnose people like that because you don't like their behavior. Now, it might make them uninterested in you, and that's okay. It's really to your benefit to know it earlier than later. And that might even make people rude, but that does not mean that they are a narcissist. So I really want you guys to be careful with diagnosing people when you don't have the full education, nor are licensed. Okay? Let's leave that for licensed mental health professionals to do the diagnoses. All right, family? But here, so this right now today, I just kind of want to talk about narcissism so that you have a better understanding of what it is. Please don't just go by something that you saw, a little thing on social media or a little video on TikTok and swear swear on the Bible, child, that is exactly what it is. And this is exactly who I'm seeing. And because it doesn't even work like that. And I will tell you this, so first of all, narcissistic personality disorder is the disorder. NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, is the disorder. And it is a personality disorder, which means that it is chronic. It is enduring over a lifespan. Like it's for a long period of time. So just because you've encountered somebody for short periods of time, and they have maybe been neglectful to you or dismissive to you, then that just might make them dismissive or neglectful. But that does not mean that they have narcissistic personality disorder. Okay? All right. So here we go. We're gonna dial it back, and then your girl is going to kind of explain some things in a way that's easy for you to understand. What narcissistic personality disorder is it is enduring, and there are symptoms that and characteristics that classify this disorder. All right. But today, like I said, I'm just going to kind of give you a little information so that you have some understanding of it. But when we think about narcissism, a narcissistic personality, it speaks to a person's inflated sense of self. I'm talking about inflated in a way where they just think that there is some superiority, that they are better than others, and they are better than others who are around them. Yeah, it's very inflated. I'm better than everybody who's around. Not because I've done anything better. Not because of any achievements, that I've done and maybe the people around me haven't done. No. Not because I ran a race and I was the fastest, right? Like an achievement, or if there was some kind of challenge and I won the challenge, then I can speak to, well, I was better at doing said thing than such and such was. So I was better in that way. No. Narcissistic, a person who is narcissistic, who ranks high on the scale, and I'll teach you about that, has this inflated sense of self where they just feel superior to everyone. I will also tell you that women can be narcissistic too. Women can have narcissistic personality disorder also. However, the truth is it is more commonly found in men. Okay, so I think that is a point that I want you guys to understand, because that's one thing that nobody comes up to me and say. No one comes up to me and tells me that their sister is narcissistic, or that their cousin is narcissistic, or one of their best friends, or their mama, or their auntie, or their grandma. No one says that. It's always put on some man. And maybe the man is. But I'm just saying, I'm just dropping some facts here, that women can be narcissistic too. They can have narcissistic personality disorder. Okay? All right. So let me just tell you the symptoms. However, as I said earlier, and I'm going to state again, it is more commonly found in men. More commonly found in men. And the reality is this: when we're talking about the disorder, got me, and that's what can be diagnosed as narcissistic personality disorder, really it's a small, very small number of people in the United States population who actually have this disorder, or let me say this, who have been diagnosed with this disorder. So probably about 1 to 5% of the United States population has been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. But I'm going to tell you why, because there's some little nuances to the diagnosis, got me? Because what I will say to you is this: if I feel superior, like I'm better than everyone else, then am I honestly going to go to someone and let them diagnose me with any freaking thing? Am I going to reach out for help from anybody? I don't care if you're a doctor or not. If I have narcissistic personality disorder, I think I'm smarter than the doctors. Okay. When we think of narcissism, it is on a spectrum. So you have to think about this. There are narcissistic traits. Narcissistic traits that a lot of people have. Narcissistic traits. Now, just because you have narcissistic traits does not mean that you should be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. Doesn't mean that you have a disorder. Doesn't mean you have a personality disorder. Now, it may be that you're difficult to be around. It may be that don't nobody really want to mess with you. You may be an annoyance, a pain in the behind, but it does not necessarily mean that you have the disorder. You understand, where it's diagnosed as a disorder. Like we talked about in one of my first episodes, schizophrenia. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, that's a disorder. That's a mental illness. It's a disorder. Or I can say bipolar disorder. It's a disorder diagnosis. So narcissistic personality disorder. So imagine a spectrum, a long line. And just imagine that at the beginning of the spectrum here, there may be, let's say, from 0 to, I don't know, let's say 300. And I'm just throwing those numbers out there just for easy understanding. So down here, you got maybe 0 to, okay, 1, 2, 3, you know what I mean? Okay. And in the middle, let's say you're at 150 traits. And then over here, you at 300 traits. Well, up here on the high end of the trait scale, you have narcissistic personality disorder. And for people who have that disorder, I told you, it's only 1 to 5% of the population. And some of the characteristics of that disorder are people who need to have I'm talking about an excessive need. They have an excessive need for admiration. So they need to be admired all of the time, like all of the time. Doesn't matter what's going on to you. You could be having a conversation with them. And while you're having a conversation with them, it always comes back to them and what's going on with them. But not just their story, but how they've done something. And there's a space for you to admire. Look at me. Look at me. Look at what I did. Look at, so whether it's at work, whether it's while they're parenting, whether it's within some kind of relational situation, as they're talking, they need to be admired. If they've done something, they are starving and yearning for your admiration consistently over and over again. So there's an excessive need. Now, I need you to hear me on this. All of us love admiration. We all do. Each and every one, human beings, right? It makes us feel good. It gives us a little dopamine burst, that's that feel good neurotransmitter that we have. I've taught you about that. So it gives you a little burst, right, of dopamine for someone to admire you, whether they admire the work that you've done, if they admire your energy, the way that you look, your hair, your whatever. We love admiration. It feels good. However, you get admired and then you move on with life. But people who are high on this narcissism scale, y'all feel me? I know you with me. When you're high on this scale, then there's an excessive need for admiration. They need to be admired all the time. Another symptom or characteristic is lack of empathy. Lack of empathy. Now, empathy. How everybody goes around as another buzzword. I'm an empath. I'm an empath. I'm an empath. There have been several times in my office as I'm working with clients. Y'all know I love my work. As I'm working with clients, and I've seen them for a few times. It doesn't even take me that long, but I could see them for the first time. But anywho, I just know that they aren't empaths, and that does not mean that you're less human. You're just not an empath. And so they'll say to me, because I'm an empath, because I feel everything. Well, I don't think that's it. But anywho, that's for another day. When we learn this on TikTok or we learn this on social media, and I get it. That's where you are. That's where you see it. Haven't really been to therapy before. And so you have these assumptions of who you are. That's why I love when you come to me, because then I can really assess you and teach you who you are, and then give you the space and the grace and help to show you can be wherever you want to be. But I digress. I'm going to go back to empathy. So, yeah, this whole lack of empathy. So they have a lack of empathy, meaning, so there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. So sympathy looks like this. When I see something happened, let's just say, I don't know, somebody crosses the street and they fall and they hurt themselves. Let's say it's an elderly lady or kid. They fall or they hurt themselves. And a person was to see them, right? And when they see them fall and hurt themselves, the thought is, or the feeling is, oh, wow. Oh, wow. I feel sorry for them. Yeah. Like I feel sorry for them. Like, cause that looked like that was tough. So I feel sorry for them. And then you go on back with your life. So sympathy, right? When you show that that you have sympathy for someone, that means that you kind of feel sorry for them, for what they're going through. You feel sorry for them. But then you move on with your life. Yeah. But empathy is when you literally can watch that same thing happen, and what you do instead is you can literally put yourself in their shoes. So you're putting yourself in their shoes, feeling what they're feeling, trying to feel what they feel. Because I'm not saying you actually feel what they feel, but you're like trying to feel what they feel. So not observing what they may feel and saying, I'm sorry for it and walking away. Empathy is like, I'm stopping what I'm doing and I'm putting my energy over here and I'm trying to feel what it is that they feel. That's empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and trying to feel what it is that they feel. So, for people who are high on the narcissistic trait line, they have a lack of empathy, almost to none. They'll never put themselves in no one else's shoes. They judge other people. Their thought would be that they would judge that person for going across the street and for falling. That was about silly. That was about dumb. Why'd you do that? Should have wore different shoes. You know, they could care less. Lack of empathy. Empathy is so low, so low. And empathy is an amazing. It's an amazing construct, because the reality is this: as we're talking about narcissism, is when we're born, some people are born with more empathy than others. Like empathy is something that you're born with. Now, through the process of living life, you can turn your empathy up some. But the fact is some people are just born with more empathy, way more empathy than others. And people who have narcissistic personality disorder, they almost have almost no empathy, especially if it's not really connected to them, because it's really about them being self-serving. And then there's a pattern of grandiosity, which is exaggerating their like achievements. They exaggerate their superiority. You know, they're always, you kind of see this chronic pattern of being grandiose, you know, of exaggerating all of their accomplishments. The person that comes to my mind now is I think about Kanye West, how he, don't get me wrong, I do believe that, you know, he is talented. He's a talented brother. But along with some other issues, he's also been very grandiose. So I am not diagnosing him with narcissistic personality disorder, but just made me think of him by his behavior as he's been exhibiting this grandiose behavior, saying that he's superior, you know, that the way he creates is better than anyone else. And, you know, he's a genius, but no one else around him is a genius. Like he's the best, you know, so it's and what he's done, he's exaggerated achievements. So that would be another symptom of narcissistic personality disorder. So these are the symptoms of the disorder. And remember, I told you that they are on a spectrum, on a continuum of having narcissistic traits. And if you have the disorder, then it's really high. You're really high. You're all the way over here on the high end of that spectrum. Now, for people who do have narcissistic personality disorder, there are two different types of disorders. So I was just talking to you about the pattern of grandiosity, but I'm going to tell you there are two types, two little subtypes of this disorder. And the first type is the grandiose type. And this is how it shows itself. It shows itself with extroversion and introversion. So let's just say for extroverts who are grandiose, then they are attention seeking. So they out and they moving around and they want attention. They are seeking attention. They have these attention seeking behaviors because they need more and more and more. So that would be the ones who are extroverts and, under the type of the grandiose type. Extroverts. And then you have the introverts. And the introverts are the ones who kind of stay to themselves, and they start to feel that, and they do that because they feel that they're special. But they are more special because remember, I told you everybody's special. But when we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, they feel like they are more special than any and everybody. Like they're not going out in the world because they're too special to go out in the world. They're too special to be tainted by the world. So that's the grandiose type. Okay. And then you have the vulnerable type. So you got the grandiose type, which says either I'm attention seeking or I'm too special to even be around. So I'm an introvert. Or you have the vulnerable type. And the vulnerable type is one that says that I am a martyr because I'm so great. I did this and nobody appreciated it. I did that and nobody appreciated it or looked at me or said, I deserve this. I deserve you to give me more. I deserve that. And because they don't get that, right, means that they're like better than Mother Teresa in their head. They're the martyr. I've sacrificed myself. I keep sacrificing. I keep laying on the ground in front of all of the pain and trucks and trains, and nobody sees it. Narcissistic. Nobody sees and gives me, what I'm worth because of what I've done for them. I'm just so good. And usually what that looks like for them, that's their feeling, but what they exude is depression and sadness. A lot of depression and sadness. Yes. So we're talking about narcissism, and we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder. And those were the two different types. One was the grandiose type, and one was that vulnerable type, the martyr. Got me? And they kind of exude sadness and depression. That's what they kind of look like. Okay, so there's this understanding of this, right? Of narcissism, and not everybody that you meet who's disinterested or who's rude or who gaslights you. That's another term, that's the old switcheroo. That's like, the person not taking accountability or responsibility, and then they kind of flip back what you said onto you. Yeah, that's another term that everybody's using now. But just because someone gaslights you does not mean that they are a narcissist or that they have a personality disorder. However, we do have these narcissistic traits. So remember, they're traits. And where they become diagnosable is when you have so many of these traits, when you have almost no empathy, when you always need to be admired all of the time. This is all of these together. Okay, when you have all these together, I'm talking about a lot. When you have this whole feeling that you are superior and you're better than others, and all of these characteristics or symptoms impede on your function, where it messes up your work, where you lose your job, or people don't want to work with you, where you ruin all of your relationships. You ruin your relationships because of so. You ruin your familiar relationships. You end up in a space where you have no friends. That is a key indication that you could be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, because not only do you have the traits, but they're also impeding on your functioning. They're impeding on your life and your quality of life. You understand? Having a normal, regular standard of life. It's having friends and going to work and being in a healthy relationship. When you have a dysfunctional relationship, people don't want to be around you. People don't want to work with you. Now we're looking at closer to being diagnosed with this narcissistic personality disorder. So, just explaining to you what narcissism is and normalizing that most people do exhibit some narcissistic traits. And some people exhibit more traits. So they are closer to the disorder than others. Okay. All right. So I'm going to validate that maybe when you came to me and said, I'm dating someone but I won't validate that they are a narcissist, and meaning they have narcissistic personality disorder. But maybe I'm dating someone who has a lot of narcissistic traits, Andrea. Then you got me. Then I go, oh, okay. Tell me more about that. So it's narcissistic traits. So that's usually what most people have. Most people they're not just narcissists, because then I don't even know that you'd still be in a relationship with someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. That's a different type of person who could actually be in that type of relationship, because there isn't much energy that's going back and forth in that relationship. It's very one-sided. So then that would speak to the person who was in relationship with this person and what needs they are getting met to be in a relationship where they really don't matter. Because remember, a person who is a narcissist doesn't empathize. So if you have feelings and you're trying to express your feelings, they could care less. They may feel sorry for you, maybe, if they have some sympathy, but they can't put themselves in your shoes. And that's why they're not going to change behavior, because they believe that they're superior and it's their way. One more thing I want to tell you before we get out of here. You may say to me, where did it come from? How do people just turn out to be narcissistic? Like, where does this even come from? And there is no specific 100% cause known. However, what is known, that there are two things that affect narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, and that is a predisposition, a genetic predisposition, and your environment. So there is a high genetic predisposition to narcissism. There is. So since we're saying on here, I told you women can be narcissistic too. They can be high on the spectrum too. However, remember what I told you, it is more commonly known and seen in men. So let's just say, then a man's, usually either his mom or his father was a narcissist. He took those genes. So maybe the mom and the dad, or probably not both, or the dad, was narcissistic or had narcissistic personality disorder, and then passed those genes on to their child, whether it was the female or the male. Okay. And the other is environment. And a lot of times what we will see is, so men who are narcissistic, usually what we see is they have a disconnect between the relationship between them and their mom. There's a disconnect in the relationship between the son and their mom. So when they were a child, they did not get all of the love and affection, connection that they needed from their mothers. And that is a fact. We see that in men who have narcissistic personality disorders. So this is what the cure looks like. There is no cure. There is no cure for it. So usually personality disorders are enduring for a lifetime. Now, can you get help? And can you be better than you were yesterday? Absolutely. And psychotherapy does help. I'm a therapist. Psychotherapy does help. So you reaching out to a therapist to get help for your narcissism or your narcissistic personality disorder can be helpful, because then maybe there are a lot of things that you aren't aware of that a therapist can show you, because now hopefully, maybe not, I'll tell you why in a minute, but hopefully when you come into a therapist, you'd be open to maybe learning about you, or trying to understand how to get better and how to heal. But y'all, this is the clicker. If I am hiding behind, if I have this personality disorder and I have this inflated sense of self and I feel superior, going back to what I mentioned earlier, am I going to go to a therapist? Am I going to go to anyone to ask them to criticize me? No, no. I am going to be living life on defense. I am going to live life on defense. People who are high on the spectrum of narcissism do not accept criticism. They can't take it. As soon as you try to give it to them, honey, they give it back. That's where the gaslight comes in. You ain't talking to me. Well, this is what you did. But you ain't talking. This is what you know how you'll say something to somebody. I got stuck because I was thinking about just something silly like, let's just say you in a partnership and you say to your partner, well, you didn't take out the garbage last week. Like, why didn't you take out the garbage? Or, you need to make sure that you take out the garbage. And then the narcissist turns around and says, huh? You ain't washed the dishes. And it's like, what? We talking about the garbage. We're not talking, that's a gaslight. Got me? That's kind of flip of the switch. Because then there is no understanding. Now they blow up. Then they become aggressive. This is what we talking about, narcissism. Then they become aggressive because you pointing out an imperfection. They ain't trying to hear it. Their mind is closed to that. That speaks of a disorder. They are not open to be criticized. So when you ask about healing, is there some healing that occurs? Can it get better? It can get better. But personality disorders are enduring disorders, meaning they kind of last for a lifetime. However, with counseling, if their mind becomes open to getting help, maybe after all of their relationships are ruined, then yes, anybody can get better. And I will also say this. So usually the people who are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, they don't usually come to treatment because they don't like criticism. But they come to treatment because narcissism is a comorbid disorder, meaning, and I'm not going to lose you here, comorbid meaning that they usually, people who have this also have something else. So at the same time. So let's just say, they have narcissistic personality disorder, or they're high on the narcissistic scale, but then they also are suffering from depression, or they also are suffering from bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. You got me? Or, having panic attacks. So usually the other illness that they have is what brings them in. So when that brings them in, then usually when they're here, whether they're in therapy or whether they're at the hospital for whatever the illness is, while they're there, then during that time they're assessed. And then that's where the diagnosis for narcissistic personality is diagnosed by a clinical professional. Y'all hear me? A mental health professional, trained and licensed professional. Okay? So y'all stop diagnosing and send them into the professionals, please. But there we go, family. So I'm hoping that you learned something today about narcissism. I'm hoping that you also learned that it's not helpful to just throw that diagnosis around, especially when it may not even be true. Okay? And if you do, after learning today, believe that you know someone in your family or in your life who may be suffering, or the people around them really is suffering from their narcissistic personality disorder, it would be good to maybe encourage them to go talk to someone to get some help. All right? All right, family. So that right there is another episode of the Mental Health is a Lifestyle podcast by your girl, Andrea Wise Brown. And I will see you on the next episode. I can't wait to see you soon.